Once upon a time, there was a king whose daughter was incredibly beautiful. When she reached marriageable age, the king sent out invitations to all the young men in his kingdom, inviting them to court so the princess could choose her husband. On the appointed day, all the eligible bachelors lined up before the princess, who held a golden apple in her hand. She was to throw it at the man she wanted to marry. To everyone's surprise, the apple hit a poor widow's son. The king, displeased with this outcome, said, "This can't be right. We must try again." The next day, the princess once again threw the apple, and it hit the same poor widow's son. On the third and final attempt, the same young man was chosen. The king, furious at this point, banished both the princess and the young man from the court and the royal city. The young man took the princess to his mother's house, a run-down hut near the bridge outside the city. When the old widow saw them, she exclaimed, "We barely had enough bread to keep ourselves alive, and now you've brought home a delicate princess. How will we survive now?" "Don't worry, mother," the princess said humbly. "I know how to spin yarn. We'll be able to earn a living." They lived this way for a few months before deciding that the young man should travel to other countries to earn money. The next day they saw a merchant crossing the bridge with 80 camel loads of merchandise bound for Arabia. The young man offered his services to the merchant, who accepted. As he prepared to leave, the princess said, "Before you go, visit the nearby monastery. There's a wise monk there who can give you some valuable advice for your journey." The young man did as she suggested, and the old monk gave him 3 pieces of advice. First, the one you love most is the most beautiful. Second, patience leads to safety. Third, there's good in every patient waiting. When he returned, the princess told him, "Remember these words well. You'll likely need them on your travels." They bid each other farewell, and the young man set off with the caravan. After a long journey, they camped in a desert near Arabia, alongside another large caravan of 80 merchants. The young man, exhausted, fell into a deep sleep. In the middle of the night, he was awakened by a herald announcing that each merchant was offering 10 gold pieces to anyone brave enough to descend into the only well in the desert and draw water for the men and animals. This well was known to be dangerous. No one who had gone down had ever come back up. Tempted by the reward, the young man volunteered. His master tried to dissuade him, but it was too late. "You're going down of your own free will," the merchant said. "If you make it back safely, one of my camels and its load of merchandise will be yours." They lowered the young man into the well with a rope. At the bottom, he found a flowing river of fresh water. After quenching his thirst, he looked up and saw a giant sitting nearby with 2 maidens, one dark and one pale. The giant boomed, "Human, I'll ask you a question. Answer correctly, and I'll let you go. Answer wrong, and I'll kill you with this club, just like I've killed many before you. Which of these 2 maidens is beautiful and which is ugly?" Remembering the monk's first piece of advice, the young man replied, "The one you love most is the most beautiful." The giant jumped up, kissed the young man's forehead, and exclaimed, "Well done, young man. You've given me the only right answer. All the others were wrong." After learning why the young man had descended into the well, the giant explained, "This well is enchanted. I'll help you get back safely. Take these 3 apples. As you go up, drop one when your feet leave the ground, another when you're halfway up, and the last one when you reach the well's mouth. This will ensure your safe return." The giant also gave him 3 pomegranates as a gift, 1 white, 1 green, and 1 red. The young man put them in his pockets, drew enough water for the caravan, and signaled to be pulled up. Following the giant's instructions, he threw the apples at the right moments and reached the surface safely. The merchants gave him the promised 800 gold pieces, and his master gave him a camel's load of merchandise. The young man asked to send the merchandise and money to his wife, and his master agreed. He added the 3 pomegranates to the load and sent it off to his hut near the bridge under the sycamore tree. The merchant, impressed by the young man's bravery and intelligence, promoted him to superintendent of the camel drivers. Years passed, and when the merchant died, his wife continued the business. She grew fond of the young man and adopted him as her son. He worked with them for 20 years before finally getting permission to visit his family. Meanwhile, back at home, a few months after the young man's departure, his wife had given birth to a son. When the camel's load of merchandise, money, and pomegranates arrived, both the old widow and the princess were overjoyed. The princess immediately recognized that the pomegranates were not ordinary fruits, but jewels. However, the old widow, thinking they were regular pomegranates, prepared to cut them, saying, "Bless my son for remembering his old mother by sending her fruits to eat." The princess quickly snatched them away and hid them in a drawer. Offended, the old woman cursed her daughter-in-law and stormed off to the next room. Thinking fast, the princess ran to a nearby shop, bought 3 common pomegranates, and brought them to her mother-in-law. "I'm sorry, mother," she said. "Please forgive my rudeness. Here are the pomegranates for you to eat." This gesture reconciled them. The princess then bought new clothes for her mother-in-law, herself, and the baby. She filled her mother-in-law's pocket with gold coins and prepared a special gift, a slice from one of the jeweled pomegranates placed in an expensive golden box. "Now, mother," she instructed, "go to the king's palace. Give the gold coins as gifts to the attendants, and say you want to see the king. Give him this golden box with the pomegranate slice inside. When he asks what you want, tell him it's a gift, and that all you desire is a decree sealed with the royal seal, allowing you to do whatever you please without being bothered." The old woman followed the princess's instructions to the letter. When she presented the jeweled pomegranate slice to the king, he was astonished. He immediately summoned his royal jewelers to assess its value. After examining the slice, the jewelers declared, "This is priceless. Imagine a 15-year-old boy throwing a stone as high as he can into the sky. A pile of gold that tall would barely equal the value of this incredible row of precious stones." The king realized he didn't have that much gold in his entire treasury. He asked the old woman, "Do you want payment for this jewel, or is it a gift for the king?" "It's a gift for your majesty," she replied as instructed. "What favor do you desire in return?" the king inquired. The old woman repeated the princess's words, asking for the royal decree. Without hesitation, the king signed and sealed the document, handing it to the old woman. Armed with this powerful decree, the princess sent slices of the 3 pomegranates to all 7 kings of the world. In return, she received unimaginable treasures. With these riches, she replaced the old hut with a magnificent palace, decorated with silver, gold, and countless jewels. The palace was so dazzling that it shone like the morning star, even at night. Word of this spectacular palace spread far and wide, drawing visitors from all over. Even the king himself came to see it. As he admired the opulence that surpassed even his own palace, he sighed deeply, saying, "If only my lost daughter were alive to live in such a magnificent place." From behind a curtain, his daughter heard him and sighed too. By this time, the princess's son had grown into a handsome and intelligent young man. He was the one who hosted the grand reception for the king in their new palace. The king was greatly impressed by the young man's charm and abilities, unaware that he was actually his own grandson. He offered the young man a position in his service and soon promoted him to commander of his forces. Meanwhile, let's return to the princess's husband, who had been away for 20 years. He finally arrived back in his homeland and went straight to where he expected to find his humble hut under the sycamore tree. To his shock and confusion, he found a magnificent palace instead, the most impressive he had seen in all his travels. The only familiar sight was the sycamore tree, now taller and thicker after 2 decades. Feeling like a stranger in his own land, he climbed the tree to get a better view. Soon he saw a woman and the young commander come out to the porch and sit together on a sofa. He recognized the woman as his wife, the princess, who had barely aged. But why was she in this splendid palace instead of their old hut? And who was this young commander sitting so close to her? Suspicion and jealousy filled his mind. He drew his bow and arrow, intending to kill them both. But just then, he remembered the monk's second piece of advice. Patience leads to safety. He hesitated and didn't shoot. A moment later, he saw the commander and his wife embrace. Again, rage overtook him, and he prepared to shoot. But the monk's third piece of advice came to mind. There's good in all patient waiting. Once more, he held back. Instead, he listened closely to their conversation. He heard the commander say, "Mother, is my father still alive? Where is he? I dreamed last night that he had come home." Upon hearing this, the man's wife began to tell their son the whole story, which she had kept secret until now. "What? exclaimed the young commander, shocked. "You're the king's daughter. I'm the commander of his army. This palace is our home, and my father is wandering in foreign lands. This is unbelievable. Tomorrow I'll take my army and search for my father." Listening from the tree, the father felt tears rolling down his cheeks. After nightfall, he climbed down and spent the night at a nearby inn. The next morning, he sent messages to his wife and son, announcing his return. Their reunion was joyous. When the king heard about the return of his dear commander's father, he rushed to offer his congratulations. As he entered the palace, he was stunned to see his long-lost daughter. She, along with her husband and son, knelt before him, asking for his blessing. The old king was overcome with joy. He embraced them all, crying tears of happiness. "Now I see," he exclaimed, "that it's useless to fight against destiny. You were meant to be together, and I couldn't have wished for a better match." Since the king had no other children, upon his death, his son-in-law, the once poor widow's son, succeeded him to the throne. And so the story comes full circle, showing how patience, love, and destiny work together to bring about a happy ending for all involved.